Alright, I'm going to pick up right where we left off in the previous nugget, where we talked about preparing CME for IP phone registrations, use the TFTP server command, the load command, and we were just on the brink of getting into the world of ePhones and ePHONE-DNs. That's where we're going to begin right now. If you have seen The Matrix before, I'm talking the original 1999 Matrix. There is a scene, actually, before I even go further, if you have not seen The Matrix before, pause this video right now, go out, buy the movie, rent the movie, whatever you need to do, you need to see The Matrix. Once you've watched The Matrix, come back, unpause this video, and I will say, there is a scene in that movie where Morpheus and Neo are in this virtual world. And this is a picture of the real world of the 21st century, where they're the machines have taken over the world. But in this scene, Morpheus takes Neo into this virtual world, and he says this line. He says, "Your appearance is now what we call residual self-image. It is the mental projection of your digital self," meaning the image that Neo saw of himself, or felt of himself, looked at, wasn't really who he was. It was just him inside of a computer system. That is the same thing that ePhones and ePHONE-DNs are. They are the virtual image of phones and directory numbers on the call manager router. You're configuring these shells that the real phones and real DNs will come into. For example, when I set up the router, I'm going to configure ePhone, we'll say 1, the first ePhone. Now under that, I'm going to put all these parameters like MAC address, the directory numbers it's going to use, maybe what music on hold it's going to play. All this kind of stuff is under the ePhone configuration. Now when the actual phone comes in, this isn't the phone, this is the digital representation of the phone. When the phone comes in and registers with the router, it goes, aha, well, based on your MAC address, I see that you are ePhone 1. This is who you are. This is your configuration. So now let's take a look at the ePhone and ePHONE-DNs individually. We'll start off with the ePHONE-DNs. The ePHONE-DNs, as I mentioned, are representations of directory numbers. So as you create these ePHONE-DNs, you're actually creating the numbers that will be assigned to the phones. These things can be single line or dual line in their configuration. Now this is when you first create the ePHONE-DN, I can say this is single line or dual line. Here's the difference. Single line is only able to receive one call at a time, and you can only have one active call at a time. If you're on an active call and somebody tries to dial you in a single line configuration, then they're going to receive a busy signal because it's going to say, sorry, you are in the midst of a call and this is only a single line. Dual line ePHONE-DNs can handle 2 simultaneous calls. This is necessary for any of these features and more. Call waiting, conference calling when you put somebody on hold and start a conference call, like an ad hoc conference call. Consultative transfers where I say, hang on, let me transfer you, and you transfer them over and kind of start a little mini conference call for a moment just to say, hey, I've got Bob here on the line. Bob, this is Jane. I'm going to drop off the call now. That's considered a consultative transfer. All of those require a dual line. And I'll tell you, for most of the configurations that you're going to do, this is the guy, dual line. Because that's what most people expect from their phone. They expect those kind of features. So you might wonder, well, why is this even an option? Well, single line is useful for things like paging lines. When you have a paging line that people can page everybody, you don't want a call waiting beep or something if 2 people try and page at the same time and all of that. So that is where a single line would be good, or just places where you only want it to be able to handle a single call and not handle multiple calls at the same time. So to configure the ePHONE-DNs, let me bring up the syntax window. There we go. I've got my call manager voice router. I'm going to do a show ePhone. Since the last nugget, I configured all the phones, and in the last nugget, I think the only one that registered was my IPCC, or not IPCC, the CIPC, Cisco IP Communicator, the soft phone. This guy right here was the only one that registered with the CME router, but all the phones that I had static IP address configurations in them. So once I cleared them all out and got them set up, they are now all registered. So you can see that when I do a show ePhone, all of these phones are showing up as quote-unquote registered phones. You see that as registered. Now, I want to emphasize that these are not ePhones in my configuration. I see the MAC address that they've registered with, but they have no phone lines. They don't have anything. So if I were to turn off the router, all these ePhones would go away. I could do a show run, and I'm jumping a little ahead. Include ePhone, and you'll be able to see there's the only command with ePhone in it is the max ePhones 24, which we typed in the last nugget, to start receiving the registrations and so on. So my point is I have no configuration as of yet, so let's start with the numbers. I'm going to go into global configuration mode and type in EPHONE-DN and do a question mark, and you see a tag. Now this tag can be anything that you want, 1 through 150, and it just needs to be unique. It's just an identifier for the line. So, me being creative, I'll start at 1. Now when I type in EPHONE-DN 1, this is where I make the decision. If I hit the Enter key, I create a single line phone, or I can follow this up with EPHONE-DN 1 dual line, which says I can support 2 calls per line or button. Now once you've created the EPHONE-DN as either a single line or dual line, you can't flip the mode without completely wiping out the EPHONE-DN. So I'd have to do a no EPHONE-DN 1 and then create it as a dual line or single line to go back and forth between the two. So when you're creating them, make sure you do that. There'd be nothing worse than, well, I'm sure there'd be worse, but it'd be a pain if you created all these EPHONE-DNs and then remembered, oh, I need to type dual line afterwards. That means you got to wipe them all out and recreate them with the dual line syntax. So now that we're under here, notice it says interface ePhone DSP DN 1.1 and 1.2. That's the 2 little sublines that you have for this phone. The router just provisioned the resources for this EPHONE-DN. So it's now ready. It's ready to go. We can the big command under here, and we'll see more, but we need to give it a phone number. So we'll say EPHONE-DN 1 is, we'll just say 1001. That's my phone number that's assigned to that. That's it. So now all I need to do is exit out of that and create EPHONE-DNs for all of the phone lines that I want to create. So I'll say EPHONE-DN 2 created. We'll say number for this guy is 1002. Now remember, these are going to be assigned to the actual devices. So you'll need to, before you really get into configuring the devices, set up all the EPHONE-DNs that represent all of the phone numbers that you would like to create. So that is creating EPHONE-DNs. Oh, one more thing I want to mention before we move on, and that is the ability to assign secondary numbers to the EPHONE-DNs. So I'm going to go into global config mode one more time. Let's go back under EPHONE-DN 3. I could say number 1003 and do a question mark. You can see secondary number is an option. So I can say secondarily respond to, we'll say 480-555-1003. Maybe you have direct inward dial or DID numbers on the outside where you'll be receiving calls either internally to 1003, or if somebody calls you externally, it'll be coming into this number. Now that's rare, but you can do that, and you can actually assign the direct inward dial number to the phone. Now, as I'm saying, I can't remember if I said it in this series or not, so let me just give you the flyby description. Direct inward dial is where you have a PSTN connection where people can dial numbers like 480-555-1003 that come in through the router and make one of the Cisco IP phone rings directly without having to go through a receptionist. So the external range matches to the internal range. Normally, the PSTN carrier will strip it down to a 4-digit extension for you, so it'll just pass 1003 to you. But if they don't, then you can use this secondary number feature to be able to respond for both. This is also handy because it allows people on the internal network to be able to dial you either via your external phone number or your 4-digit internal extension. Now that we've got the EPHONE-DN set up, we can look at the ePhones themselves, the representations of the Cisco IP phones on the CME router. This is going to be the configuration where we can apply it to the phone itself. Now, anytime you configure an ePhone, it is linked to the device by its MAC address. There are 3 places that you can get that MAC address. First off, it's printed on the box of the Cisco IP phone, so the box that the phone comes in will have a little UPC label that you can scan with a hand scanner that has the MAC address of the phone. Now, it also prints the MAC address right below that UPC label as well. Once you take the phone out of the box, you can look on the back of the Cisco IP phone. As a matter of fact, I've got that right here. This is a video of my 7970 phone. If you look at this phone, on the back of it, forgive my wire mess, you can see all these labels. Now, I don't expect you to be able to interpret those labels, but right here, hang on, which one is it? It is this guy. This is the MAC address. So again, it's on a UPC scannable label. Same thing over here is the serial number, and this is the part number of the phone. So right in the middle on the label is the MAC address. But keep in mind, both of those can be taken off and thrown away, or just worn away over time. So you can also get the IP address from the settings menu of any IP phone. Now, this phone's a little hard to see because of the glare. So let me flip on over to my 7905 here. Right here, whoa, let me get some focus here. Please hold. Focusing in, there we go. Right here is the settings button of the 7905. I click on that, it comes up and says Message, Directory, Settings. Just scroll down a little bit, hit the Settings button. Third one down is Network Configuration. Select that, so Settings, Network Configuration. And you can see, let me move my mouse. You can see the third one down right there is the MAC address. So I can actually get the MAC address off of the phone itself. And that goes for any phone model that you have. 7960, 70, you can always get to it through the network configuration. Now, that's if you're looking at the phone. And before I show you the CME router, the reason that Cisco makes these labels printable, like UPC scannable on the back of the phone, both of these are UPC labels, is because you can get a hand scanner and configure them to where you can just scan that, it'll boop, show up the MAC address, and then give you a field where you can type in the number. And then you can export that to like an Excel spreadsheet or a comma-separated document file, that kind of thing. So you can make it a little easier for yourself if you have a hand scanner, just going around, beep, 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 scanning all the devices, typing in the number, and you've got a spreadsheet of all the MAC to phone number mappings that you want to make. Now, if you don't have a hand scanner and you don't want to go phone by phone, one of the things that I've gotten used to is I'll go to the CME router itself. And you remember that command, show ePhone. Now, by default, the Cisco CME router has auto registration enabled, which means that all of these phones, you can see it right here. Hang on, let me pull this up. This is an auto registered IP phone. It shows Cisco Unified CME. It doesn't have a phone number. Doesn't have an ePhone entry. I haven't configured anything, but it shows up with the correct date and time in Cisco Unified CME because it's auto-registered, meaning its MAC address will show up right here. Now, the benefit of having this is you've got all of the MAC addresses in a nice little row for you. So what you can have is another administrator going around. They go to somebody's desk and call you and from their cell phone and say, yeah, I've got the phone with the last 4 digits of the MAC address being C2DA, and you find it in your list. You go, okay, got it. What phone number do we want to give that? So right there you've got it in a copy and paste format. So now you can go in to global config mode, and I can say ePhone-1, enter. I'm now configuring the phone itself, and I'll say the MAC address. Let me just hit MAC tab, and you can see MAC address is, and I just highlight my first one right there. There's our ePhone-1, E71A. Right click and paste that in there. Bang, I've got my first MAC address created. I then exit out and do ePhone-2, MAC address, and scroll up here to ePhone-2. You get the idea. So you can go phone by phone adding them in here. Now, at this point, all I'm showing you is adding the phones by MAC address. This is so the router doesn't forget about them. As of right now, if I reboot my Cisco router, you see I've got a 7960, 7912, 7012, CIPC, Cisco IP Communicator. All of these different devices are gone, forgotten, every single time the router reboots because there's no configuration that I can save in the running config that matches this MAC address to a specific ePhone. But what I've been typing in, I'll do a show run, do section ePhone to where I just see all of the ePhones and EPHONE-DNs I've set up, and I see all my EPHONE-DNs, and now I'm starting to see all of the ePhones that I've configured. Now, if I want to, I'll do ePhone1. I can type in type and say what type of ePhone this is and specify the type. The Cisco router will automatically find this out for you. So if you want to put it in there for your own information, like you do a show run and you want to see what type of phones these all are, feel free to type in the type and what type of IP phone it is. But you don't have to. The Cisco router will recognize and do the correct configuration for you. But this is not yet assigning the phone numbers to the phone. This is just creating the ePhones and associating them with a MAC address. So let's get our bearing on where we're at. When we're configuring ePhone and EPHONE-DNs, we first configured the EPHONE-DNs, the phone numbers. We then created the ePhones, that represents the phones themselves, and you can switch this order if you want to. It just seems more logical to create the phone numbers for the phones than the phones themselves. And then last but not least, and what we're about to do, is associate the ePhones and EPHONE-DNs using the mystical button command. I call it that because it was a little weird for me when I first got into CME to see how this thing worked. Not only is the syntax a little odd for the button command, but there's so many options for it that you're going to go, wow, there's a lot to this one button command. Let me show you the basics of this, and then we'll get into all the different options. I'm going to bring up my CME router again, and let me just clear the screen, get a blank slate of where we're at. So I'm on my CME router. I'm going to do a show run and include, or I'll do the section of ePhone, so I can see everything that has ePhone in it. So we've got EPHONE-DN 1, dual line, 2, 3. There's our 3 numbers right there. And then at this point, I have 2 ePhones configured. Now I want to set up an ePhone for this guy right here so that we can begin assigning him a phone number. But since he's running on my computer, he's going to be the MAC address of my computer. So I'll do a show ePhone. And thankfully, there's only one Cisco IP communicator in this configuration. It's registered. This is its MAC address. So let me get that on my clipboard. Go into global config. Do ePhone. Let's do 3. MAC address is this guy. Done. ePhone slot already registered with right. That's interesting. So it's saying F845. The ePhone slot is all. Oh, wait a sec. Let's scroll back up here. No? I thought I already had a. Oh. Sorry about that. What I did was I created ePhone 3, which when I was creating the ePhones before, sorry, it took me a sec to catch on. You see ePhone 1 right there, and I did MAC address of this, which, when you do a show ePhone, matches to what the router has for ePhone 1. So what it's saying is, hey, I've already got a auto-registered phone at ePhone 3 with this MAC address, so you can't do that. So what I need to do is create ePhone 5, and I'll do MAC address right here. Paste it in. There we go. So now it's not conflicting with any of the auto-registered information. So with that in place, I now have an ePhone created for my Cisco IP communicator. Now let's talk about the button command. I'm going to type in button and do a question mark. You can see it comes up and says, here are your options: normal phone lines, silent ring, the call waiting beep not muted, all these different things showing what you can do. And the beauty of, context sensitive help is normally helpful, but this is a really helpful one because Cisco realizes that this button command's a little odd. So what you need to do, let's talk about normal phone lines. That's what I show you right now. You can see example button 1:2, button 2:5. The way this syntax works is I get to say what button on my Cisco IP phone, and remember, let me go back to the full view. These over here are my buttons. So this is button 1, button 2, and you can see if I mouse over it, pops up line 3, line 4, and so on. So when I say button 1, :1, or :2, what that's saying is assign EPHONE-DN number 2 to button 1. So before I do this, let me do a show run section ePhone one more time, just so we can see all the EPHONE-DNs that we have at our disposal. So I'll say button 1 on this ePhone right here, ePhone 5, is going to be, let's do EPHONE-DN 1. So I'll do 1:1 and hit enter. Now, as soon as I do this, this isn't a dynamic, like wham, it's just going to show up. I have to use either the restart or reset button. You can see we have restart or reset. Two different options that I can type in. Restart does a warm boot of the phone, meaning it's not going to completely power off, lose its IP address, have to boot cycle, all that kind of stuff. It's just going to do a flash. When I do a reset, it's going to restart. When I do a restart, it's going to flash the phone and tell it, go get a new configuration file from the TFTP server. The phone does that and applies its new configuration. The reset command is only necessary when I'm making major changes to the phone. Like, I need to change its IP address. It's in a different DHCP scope. Or I need to change the language of the phone, the actual language settings, and have it re-download all the language files and things like that. So reset is not normally necessary, and that's good because it takes a lot longer. Restart is pretty quick. So let me shrink this guy back down, and I'm just going to issue down here restart, which causes it to restart. You see all my buttons on the bottom blank out. Shows unregistered normally, it's restarting, and look at that. I now have extension 1001 as line 1 of the phone. Now I can also go in here and say, let's do button 2, finding my colon key, button 2, let's just make it line 2, EPHONE-DN 2. Okay, and you don't have to do that. I could do button 2, :3, or whatever I wanted to do there. But I'll just say button 2, :2. You can see I can type them on separate lines, or I want to show you, I can also continue typing multiple buttons. I can say, while I'm at it, I want to do button 3, :3. Restart. So what that does is make two phone number assignments at the same time on the same line of configuration. I could do, if I wanted to, I could have said button 1, :1, 2, :2, 3, :3. And I want to make sure that as I'm talking about this button syntax, I'm not misleading you into thinking one has to be 1. I could type in, let me do this. I could do button 1, :3. Oh, come on. No, button 3, :3. I'll do button 1, :3. There we go. And I'll do a restart. And you can see button 3 will disappear. That was not what I expected to see. I expected oh no, I did no button 1. Why didn't you say something? Should have said, Jeremy, take off the no. Alright, so I'm going to do a restart. And now you can see button 1 has line 3. So it doesn't have to match 1, :1, 2, :2, 3, 3, I can actually have them match like that. So that is the basics of phone number assignment. And now, at this point, I can make a phone call. Albeit, I can only call myself because I don't have any other phones that are assigned phone numbers yet. I can dial 1003. And you can see I'm making a call from 1002 to 1003, and I see my little ringing animation. That if I actually had a IP phone sitting in front of me, I would see the little same cute animation for the 7970 on the screen like that. And right now, as I'm speaking, I'm hearing ringing in my ears because it's using my headphones as an output. But you can see we have a working phone network at this point. Now that you've seen the base configuration for the button command, I think you can start understanding why the button command is mystical. And I'm looking at my time, and I'm debating. I'm deciding. I need to break this into a part 3 of this, because when we start going through these, I'm going to show you all of the possible arguments for the button command and what they do. And as we go through these, I want to make sure I have the time to explain it fully and not rush through it to pack this into a nugget-sized video. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you the high-level view. The reason the button command is mystical is because there's many different arguments that you can use. This one is what we were just using, assigning button 1 EPHONE-DN number 5 to the line. And the colon makes a lot of sense because it's kind of like, oh, colon, button 1 is button 5, or EPHONE-DN 5. But we have all of these different arguments that we can put in here, the B, the F, the M, and all that we can say this is a monitor mode button, or this is a feature ring button. And each one of these things causes the button to act and behave differently. Now, if I were just talking about, the monitor mode and the feature mode, that I'd be able to squeeze this in no problem. But there is a big discussion we need to have on something known as overlay lines. This is your method of doing shared phone numbers. And that's where I'm going to leave it in this nugget. Now, between this and the next nugget, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the rest of my IP phones to the CME configuration as ePhones. Because as of right now, I only have 3 of the ePhones added. I'm going to add them all. And then when we start up in the next nugget, I'm going to start assigning the rest of those buttons using the normal button commands. Then we'll start exploring a lot of these different options. So till then, we have now defined ePhones, EPHONE-DNs, and at least I'm gonna make this circle bigger. We've gone through the base configuration of the ePhones and EPHONE-DNs, but then I'm gonna, in the next nugget, start coloring in all of the stuff around that and look at the possibilities using the button commands of overlay, of monitor mode, what all these different features do. So for now, I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.